Sir, we are live now. You can go ahead, sir.
All right. Good evening. I'm Dr. Dheeraj Kumar. Today, we'll talk about principles in management of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and especially from the angiotensin neprilysin inhibitor perspective. So, as you know, that the heart failure has been divided into three distinct subtypes. Heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, where the ejection fraction is more than 50%. Heart failure with mid-range ejection fraction, where the ejection fraction hovers between 40 to 50%, and heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, wherein the EF ejection fraction is less than 40%. Now, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is quite a different animal. It behaves very differently from heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. The symptoms and signs are absolutely indistinguishable from each other. So that obviously we are not going to talk about, but just to say that there is no therapy currently which decreases mortality in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And the entire cardiology diaspora is all about finding therapy for it. ARNI has showed some promise in surrogate endpoints in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. But over and above, let's talk about reduced ejection fraction because its prognosis is slightly worse than preserved ejection fraction. Now, what do we know about etiology and prevalence of heart failure in India? Well, if you compare to the European data, Indian heart failure populations are lesser a decade earlier. Why is it so? Well, it is because Indians have genes which make them susceptible to early myocardial infarctions, because of which the heart failure as a result of ischemic heart disease occurs earlier in Indians. The average Indian ejection fraction is lower than the Western population. You see, the death rate is in stark contrast to the European, what do you call, uh, European population. Why is it so? Well, it's because if you see the percentage of patients who are getting medical therapy for heart failure with reduced ejection fraction is abysmally low in India. And even those who are getting therapy are not getting followed up regularly by their cardiologists. They are not compliant to dietary and salt restrictions. And of course, the use of modern therapy like angiotensin neprilysin inhibitor and the newer agents which are used in heart failure like SGLT2 inhibitors, the use is abysmally low. I would still say go on and hazard my a guess saying that only about 10% patients of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction are actually receiving these newer agents. Even the agents which are known to decrease heart failure admission prior to the discovery of ARNI, like beta blockers, mineralocorticoid antagonists, are used at doses which are way lesser than the required doses. For example, most of the beat patients are on metoprolol 25 milligrams, 40, 50 milligrams, but not up to 100 and 200 milligrams because of one, physician apathy, and two, lack of regular follow-up. Because if we have to get the trial like benefits for our patients, then we have to give them the trial like doses of these medications. And this is a very important and a powerful message which needs to be spread to cardiologists and physicians alike, right? So there, and of course, you see that rehab hospitalization rates are marginally higher, death post discharge is very high. So the big three causes of heart failure hospitalization. See, once a patient is diagnosed with the diagnosis of heart failure, um, and you manage it well and discharge this patient, the chances of rehospitalization are very high, especially if they are not compliant to salt restriction. Indian diet is very, very high in salt content, and therefore salt retention, sodium retention, ischemic heart disease, again re-ischemic episodes, myocardial infarctions, arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia are very common causes of rehospitalization. And remember, these are the two objectives that we have in a heart failure patient. Heart failure portends an extremely poor prognosis. Once a patient is symptomatic, patient with the best possible therapy also has got a 50% mortality in the next 5 years, which is comparable to malignancies. Although the patients always think of malignancy as a more serious disease, whereas heart failure has got a bit of a you you know innocent sort of a ring to the patients that and the physicians alike, which is absolutely wrong. We need to take it really seriously. Second thing that is important is, as we saw, heart failure affects younger population in India. Most of these people are working, and if we lose them to recurrent admissions or they are incapacitated to work, it has a financial implication to their families. Now, why is the Indian heart failure different? Well, if you see the previous slide, if you see in heart failure hospitalization, rheumatic heart disease is very, very important component of heart failure. Whereas it has gone to single digits in USA and Europe, India continues to have patients even with rheumatic heart disease like aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, rheumatic mitral regurgitation, and you get patients with severe rheumatic mitral regurgitation related heart failure in the 30s as well. So this is another unmet need wherein which surgeons are needed to correct this. So what is different is in the future we are having a young population, therefore there's a scope for aging, and aging population means increased hypertension, diabetes, etc. There we already have a rising coronary artery disease prevalence and epidemic rise in the key risk factors. Remember, heart failure risk factors are very, very similar to coronary artery disease risk factors: presence of hypertension, presence of diabetes mellitus, and persistence of such diseases, rheumatic heart disease and untreated congenital heart disease. Um, well, we know that diabetes is very common in Indians, and although the data is sparse, we can safely estimate that the percentage of diabetes is say 8 to 10%, and therefore we need to be very, very vigilant. Again, male to female ratio is also dominated by number of male patients, which are many more than female patients with heart failure. This is in stark contrast with preserved ejection fraction, where more women have heart failure with preserved ejection fraction as compared to men, because of probably greater incidence of ischemic heart disease and infarcts. So, well, if you look at this is a very interesting slide which looks at early phase, late phase, optimization phase per discharge and transition to care. So when a patient gets admitted with heart failure with preserved heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, that is clinical decompensation, what is very important is the patient gets optimum care. But IV diuretics and IV inotropes and everything. But what happens is the focus starts drifting as a patient improves symptomatically. And if the patient is not improved or worsened, again, the focus increases. Whereas when the patient improves, people are more reluctant. What happens is after day 3, day 4 of their hospital admission, when you have given diuretics, made them dry, and the patient feels better, the transition to oral therapy is a main phase where physicians are making a mistake. One thing is that they don't start guideline based therapy. If you see the discharge prescription of heart failure, some people will not have beta blockers, some of the patients will not have ACE inhibitors or ARNI, and most of the patients will not have mineralocorticoid antagonists. Because of this, because of the fact that they are not getting guideline based optimal therapy, these patients keep going back into the ADHF phase. So this phase is where we need to put emphasis upon after discharge. When there is a post early discharge phase, this is where cardiac rehabilitation is very important, wherein which people are ideally encouraged to do graded exercises by a physiotherapist. Again, this is an area which is seriously lacking, because if patient is going to sit at home, they are not going to exert. Obviously, these patients are not going to be functionally better. Exercise has its effects in endorphins. A lot of these patients suffer from depression, and of course, transition to chronic care. This is another area wherein which we are lacking. What happens is, initially we always start a low dose of ACE inhibitor or ARNI, let's say 50 milligram BD of ARNI, or let's say 2.5 milligram, because we are always concerned that the patient's blood pressure will fall. Let us see whether he tolerates it well or not. When the patient comes back to us in our OPD for follow-up, we have to increment it. You have to up titrate it. The beta blockers are needed to be up titrated every 2 weeks, a bit more gradual, whereas ACE inhibitors or ARNI need to be up titrated every weekly till you reach a target dose if the blood pressure is more than 100. So this is very important, and therein lies the physician apathy. One is, of course, initiating the appropriate GDMT, and second is up titrating these medications, right? Again, so therefore the guidelines were reviewed because of the so for a long period of time in heart failure there weren't many discoveries. The first drug, as you will recall, which showed benefit in heart failure was aldactone. So that was a mineralocorticoid antagonist. After that came the beta blockers, and beta blockers were found to be significant in decreasing mortality. Then came ACE inhibitors in the SOLVED study and many other studies, AIRE study. Therefore, after that, there was a period of quiescence in the field of heart failure for about 20 years. The vasodilatory, natriuretic peptides, etc., all failed. It was in the year 2014 when ARNIs were the results of the paradigm heart failure were published. And this led to a landmark change in our understanding of heart failure. First things first, on top of guideline based therapy, there was an incremental 20% relative risk reduction of heart failure hospitalization and mortality, which was an amazing feat. So that made sure that ARNIs were the new kids on the block and the kids that were there to stay. Over the years, but at that point of time, people criticized that this is only one trial. What if it's a one-off phenomenon? But over the years, many trials on ARNI have gone on and showed that ARNIs not only help in decreasing heart failure, heart failure endpoints, but also even secondary things like heart failure related mitral regurgitation, reverse remodeling. And we will continue to see that. Based on this, we now had an upgradation of level of recommendation and level of a class of recommendation level of evidence to 1B in the 2016 focused update on new pharmacologic therapies in heart failure, wherein which ACE inhibitor or ARNI upfront in conjunction with beta blocker. So you can directly start ARNI in a patient of ADHF when he presents first time to you, along with beta blockers and mineralocorticoid antagonists for chronic reduced heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Bear in mind that in 2017, there was Paradise MI, wherein which acute heart failure with reduced ejection fraction also was evaluated. And of course, there we haven't had the results yet, but we do feel that this is going to be beneficial in acute heart failure with reduced ejection fraction as well to decrease morbidity and mortality. Also, if a patient is stable on ACE inhibitor, then there is a serious consideration to switch over this patient from ACE inhibitor to ARNI to reduce morbidity and mortality, because the paradigm heart failure suggested that ACE inhibitor is just not good enough. You need to switch over these patients to ARNI. Now, initially, the cost of these drugs were prohibitively high, but after going off patent, it's not yet off patent, but I think it's going to be off patent pretty soon. And after this, the cost is no longer a factor. Some of the Indian companies have also started producing it. So therefore, I feel that this now should be a standard of care for heart failure management in India. One thing very important is when you are switching over from ACE inhibitor to ARB, you have to keep a gap of 36 hours. Let's say the patient is on ramipril 5 milligram. So the 5 milligram equivalent of ramipril is 100 milligram BD of ARNI. I will talk about equivalence later. So basically, ramipril is commonly used ACE inhibitor in India. So if somebody is on 2.5 milligram once a day, this will be equal to 50 milligram BD of ARNI. 5 milligram is equivalent to 100 milligram BD of ARNI, and 10 milligram is equivalent to 200 milligram BD of ARNI. So if somebody is on ramipril, you have to advise the patient, please stop this drug. Don't take it today. Don't take it tomorrow. and let us say day after tomorrow you take the first dose of ARNI. This is because there is a there can be dangerous hyperkalemia, because ARNI contains valsartan and ACE inhibitors are containing ramipril. So ACE inhibitors and ARBs together in a patient can cause dangerous hyperkalemia and also angioedema. Risk of angioedema increases. ARNI should not be given to patients with angioedema. Now, one very important aspect that I need to tell you is generally ARNIs are much better tolerated than ACE inhibitors in Indian subpopulation. There are many studies which show that up to 20 to 50%, 20% to 30% at least of patients in India who are administered ACE inhibitors develop dry cough. ARNIs are much better tolerated. So this is the ESC guidelines, which shows how the what do you call heart failure with reduced ejection fraction patient should be treated. First, you start ACE inhibitor and beta blocker once the blood pressure is there is no hypotension. If the blood pressure is normal, after decongestion, start ACE inhibitors and beta blockers. If after that also the patient remains symptomatic, that is class 2 or class 3 NYHA. We know that class 1 NYHA is patient who can do his activity of daily living. NYHA class 2 is limited, mild limitation, or a patient who cannot perform activities of his daily living, or and class 3 is patient who has marked limitation of activity of his daily living, presence of orthopnea, presence of paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. And class 4 is a patient at rest, having symptoms at rest or even on just movement, minimal movement, he has symptoms. So for heart failure, NYHA class 2 and class 3, despite optimal medical management, you need to add a mineralocorticoid antagonist and you keep up titrating it. If the patient is still symptomatic after MRA, ACE inhibitor, and beta blocker, there is the chance that you have to replace ARNI instead of ACE inhibitor. Now, I propose that with the Americans guidelines, this is better. Start up front with ARNI and beta blockers, and then add mineralocorticoid antagonists, so that there is no scope for adding ARNI later. Because why to not give benefit earlier than later? Because of hemodynamic benefits accruing over a long period of time, it's always better to start with ARNI rather than ACE inhibitor, try ACE inhibitor at all. Second thing is, of course, if QRS duration is more than 130 and there's a left bundle branch morphology, you can evaluate the need of resynchronization therapy. And of course, if sinus, despite maximal tolerated beta blocker, the heart rate is more than 70, you can give ivabradine. This is a very important thing. Your target heart rate in heart failure patient is always less than 70. I would say you can go even up to 60, because when you decrease the heart rate, you decrease mortality, you decrease arrhythmic episodes. So therefore, you keep up titrating the beta blockers until you reach the heart rate of 60. This is the same for coronary artery disease patients. It is the same for heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. If, however, after this also there are symptoms, then you can give hydralazine isosorbide dinitrate. This drug is again underutilized in patients with deranged creatinine, acute kidney injury. You may not be able to use either of these two agents, mineralocorticoid antagonist and ACE inhibitor or ARNI. That is when you must use this agent, hydralazine and isosorbide dinitrate. Very, very effective in this sort of a situation. Of course, left ventricular assist devices and heart transplantation are relatively difficult. Now, in the current era, SGLT2 inhibitors are added to this algorithm. So you, after ARNI, if the patient is still symptomatic, you can add SGLT2 inhibitor like empagliflozin and dapagliflozin and see whether that benefits or not. So this is very important. And because of this, actually there's a paper which says that there is a reduced need for cardiac resynchronization therapy. Now, we know that in heart failure, in the acute phase, there is an increase in renin-angiotensin system, activation of renin-angiotensin system and sympathetic nervous system, which leads to increase angiotensin 2, aldosterone, norepinephrine, vasopressin, endothelin. While these mediators are very useful in acute phase to make sure that there is compensation, later on these lead to reverse remodeling, what do you call remodeling, which is deleterious. They cause vasoconstriction, fluid retention. Aldosterone causes fibrosis in the myocytes and death of myocytes and hypertrophy, which leads to ultimate decompensation in heart failure. Therefore, to neutralize that, we are taking care of this angiotensin 2 by ARNI or ACE inhibitors. We're talking about aldosterone by what do you call mineralocorticoid antagonist. We're talking about norepinephrine by using uh, beta blockers. Again, there is a decrease in natriuretic peptides, nitric oxide, prostaglandin, bradykinin. These cause vasodilatation, diuresis, antifibrotic, and antihypertrophic. Now, when this decreases, this is by peptidase enzymes, and the inhibitor of this is your sacubitril. So the sacubitril and valsartan balance it. One increases these natriuretic peptides and nitric oxide and bradykinin. The valsartan part inhibits angiotensin 2. So it restores the neurohumoral balance in heart failure to one wherein less renin angiotensin activation takes place and one wherein more compensatory mediators are secreted. That is the reason why you get this. This is the landmark graph. See this. This is the graph in which 8,399 subjects with NYHA class 3 or class 4 with LVF less than or equal to 40% were recruited in a study. And over the period of next 5 years, you can see this LCZ 696 is nothing but ARNI. Okay, and enalapril was the control arm, and you see a great difference. The curves separate soon in about 90 days or so, and the difference in mortality is maintained up until the 5 years. So this is something that is very, very, very useful to understand that overall there is a reduction of 20% relative risk. See, 0.8, this thing hazard ratio is 20% relative risk, and in some subsets it can go up to 27% as well. Number needed to treat is a very important thing. That means you need to treat 21 patients with ARNI over ACE inhibitor to get one decreased episode of death or heart failure admission. So it's a pretty low number needed to treat. Anything below 30 is very good. And you look at this, ARNIs decrease cardiovascular mortality, heart failure, hospitalization, overall all-cause mortality also is significantly reduced. Heart failure death and sudden cardiac death all have been decreased with LCZ 696 or ARNI. So it was a pretty blockbuster trial. And you see that time since hospitalization, if you see, there is a serious patients who are clinically stable as shown by remote heart failure hospitalization more than 3 months prior to screening, or by lack of were likely to benefit as compared to more recently hospitalized patient. So somebody who's been what do you call less below within the 3 months of previous hospitalization gets these drugs, you get more benefit. Overall, no prior hospitalization also patients got benefit. Patients who did not have, who had hospitalization between 3 to 6 months had lesser benefit. I suspect even this part of the graph would have been on the left-hand side. It's just because this number of patients were low. Remember, that is one of the problems with subgroup analysis. The patients are less, you may not be able to differentiate well as far as subgroups are concerned. Well, this is very important. When we have a patient of heart failure and we call it stable, physician says, okay, it's an NYHA class 2 symptom. This patient can climb 2 flights of stairs with minimal discomfort. This is a stable patient. Well, you must understand that 20% of stable patients in this study also had an event and 17% died. So there is no question that stability in heart failure is just an illusion. 60% of these patients had sudden cardiac deaths. Remember, the most common modality of death in a patient with heart failure is not refractory heart failure. It is sudden cardiac death, maybe due to ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation. So this ARNI has led to a reduction in sudden cardiac death mortality as well. So therefore, a strategy of deferring initiation until clinical deterioration occurs is actually inadvisable, because you don't wait until the patient actually clinically deteriorates. That is the reason why in the previous flow chart I highlighted the fact that you start with ACE ARNIs, don't change over to ARNIs when ACE inhibitors don't work, because you might be already late. Every time the patient gets readmitted, a heart failure patient gets readmitted, you will cause more and more adverse modeling and more chances of death. Therefore, prevent these heart failure hospitalizations early so that you can change the natural history of the disease. Well, this is a very elegant paper presented by Januzzi et al., in which they looked at the echocardiographic parameters of heart failure. And you see that there is an increase in ejection fraction overall in their patients by 5.2% and 9.4% sustained improvement over 12 months. Left ventricular end diastolic volume. See, because in heart failure, because of inadequate emptying, the diastolic volume and systolic volume keeps increasing. You see that there is a significant reduction in diastolic volume and systolic volume. So this is very important in follow-up patients of heart failure, if you can quantify the diastolic and systolic volumes. Okay, so this is an excellent modality. Left atrial volume indexed, we know that this correlates with the risk of future atrial fibrillation, and diastology, the way in which the heart relaxes, all showed marginal improvements. So what is the quality of life? Okay, we have changed the mortality aspects. What about patients? How do the patients feel? Well, Kansas City questionnaire, which showed that there is a significant improvement. A significant number of patients had more than equal to 5 percentage points change as compared to enalapril in patients who were subjected to ARNIs. And very few patients, just half the patients of enalapril were actually worsening with respect to ARNIs. So not only does it improve survival, it also decreases symptoms. Now, ARNI is a paradigm shift in the management of heart failure. So what happened is, let's look at this. Paradigm heart failure was for outpatients. Dose titration study was for outpatients. Now what happened is, in hospital admission and improving, just when the patients start improving, pioneer heart failure showed benefit, and transition study is just after stabilization and discharge. So we are not looking at one aspect alone of chronic heart failure. We are looking up through the entire spectrum. Sacubitril valsartan, well, in heart failure, well, we know that in paradigm heart failure, there was a significant benefit. Well, this benefit was actually much, much better, much more in pioneer heart failure, in which the death, heart failure hospitalization, and LVADs and transplant listing was used as an endpoint. And you can see that 46% patients got benefit in acute heart failure. So not only is it useful in chronic heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, just when you see patients improving, you please start ARNI at a lower dose and then increment it as per blood pressure, and you would see a huge benefit. So pre-discharge initiation of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Well, we looked at pre-discharge initiation of beta blockers, any beta blockers, and beta blockers at 60 days. If you see, this is pre-discharge initiation has much, much better results. It's getting better as far as the percentages is concerned. Now, we know that pioneer heart studies design was anybody who had acute decompensated heart failure, admitted, stabilized with systolic BP of 100, no use of IV diuretics for decongestion in the previous 6 hours, no IV vasodilator for the previous 6 hours, and no inotropes in the previous 24 hours. They were randomized to 10 milligram BD enalapril versus sacubitril valsartan 200 milligram, that is 9703 twice a day, and they were blinded. It was a study for 8 weeks, and what was evaluated is NT-proBNP, safety, tolerability, and clinical outcomes. And we saw these wonderful uh, diagram which shows a clear benefit in not only NT-proBNP, which is a surrogate clinical endpoint, but also cardiovascular death and hospitalization, which was way lower, 42% better, decreased risk of hospitalization for heart failure and death, cardiovascular mortality. This is a huge benefit which we cannot ignore. And if in today's era, anybody who's admitted with heart failure is not started on ARNIs, then I think we are doing harm by not doing it, by not giving him the appropriate therapy. Early clinical benefits, well, we know this is again similar, it's probably repetitive. You have a 42% reduction. And this actually, what this graph shows is the benefit starts from 21 days, 28 days onwards. So the two curves split very early, around 14 days later, the curve starts splitting, and enalapril continues to accrue more events, whereas sacubitril valsartan has significantly lower events. And I suspect if this study if these patients were followed up after a year, the difference will be even more impressive, because we have already seen that in chronic heart failure, this becomes a chronic heart failure maybe 3 months later. We have already seen that chronic heart failure ARNI does wonders. So this graph, I think, should theoretically keep on separating. And I hope these publishers publish a 2-year data and 5-year data of these patients follow-up of these patients. Well, there is a very interesting aspect. A lot of physicians are very much hesitant to start ARNIs because they feel that the blood pressure is going to be low. So now, very important is when the BP is between 100 to 120, start with dose level 1, that is 50 milligram BD, that is 2426. And then if the BP after a few days, after 1 week, if the BP is more than 110, you escalate it to 100 milligram BD. If the BP remains higher than this after a week or so, then you can go to dose level 3, 100, if the systolic BP is more than 100. If the BP, however, falls, then you can de-escalate it. And if the BP again rises, you can escalate it. This is very important, and this can be actually implemented in your real day-to-day practice. Start low, see the tolerability, and then go higher. For somebody whose systolic BP is more than 120, no doubt, no question that you start with dose level 2. And you observe for a week, and then up titrate to dose level 3. But the objective is to reach dose level 3, because optimal benefit is to reach dose level 3. So what happens is physician apathy occurs. 110 to 120, somebody's on dose level 1, patient's BP next visit is 110, and then there is no incremental dose of level 2. Then the patient continues to be on dose level 1. So this is where this is one aspect that we need to change. Now, what about efficacy as far as NT-proBNP? Significant decrease in dose level 3 and dose level 1. So although you get clinical evidence of very good benefit at dose level 3, something is better than nothing, because even dose level 1 gives you a significant decrease in your BNP levels. Okay. So, well, percentage change by visit in patients. So, well, again, you see change of patients as far as what do you call NT-proBNP, and you see that this NT-proBNP levels are lower in sacubitril valsartan, maintained throughout the 8 weeks, and they start dropping tremendously in the first week itself. That's how powerful this drug is. Of course, we have talked about rehospitalization rates, and this is what I was highlighting, that the rehospital, it's a clinical part where dose level 3 works better. We saw that dose level 1 and dose level 3 are equivalent in terms of NT-proBNP, but in clinically, almost less than half of these events, percentage of events occur in dose level 3. Therefore, your objective is to increase the RNEs to their full dose, that is 200 milligrams twice a day. Okay, so eliminate the eliminate or reduce dose of non-essential vasodilators. This is very important. Whenever a patient's blood pressure falls, why is it? Is it due to ARNI? Whenever you start ARNI, you have to decrease other agents which cause vasodilatory things, like loop diuretics. Somebody's on 40 milligram furosemide, decrease it to 20. Then non-essential vasodilators like amlodipine, if it is being used, you can stop. Reduce the dose of cyclobutyl valsartan, don't stop it. And consider a cardioselective beta blocker without vasodilating properties. So somebody is on what do you call nitric oxide releasing beta blockers, you can switch over to a normal beta blocker like metoprolol or bisoprolol. And only when these above fail, that's when you stop the drug. So of course, this is Paragon heart failure, where in which we evaluated the patients and we looked at hospitalizations and heart failure. We did not get the statistical significance, although we got numerically less what do you call events in patients with heart failure. This was for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And well, therefore, there's the females had a much better benefit as far as heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. This is probably very interesting. So maybe it works in FPEF with what do you call the sex is concerned. And if you have a B ejection fraction which is more than 57%, it doesn't work. So even in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, these are 50 to 57% patients where you get a little bit of a benefit. So obviously heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is a bit of a conundrum. So how do you start it? Well, you start it in symptomatic heart failure patients with class 2, class 3 disease. Optimal medical therapy as per guidelines, hospitalized heart failure within 12 months, you start it. And LVEF less than 35%. If NT-proBNP is more than 400 and creatinine clearance. This is important. Creatinine clearance should be more than 30. Now, another two aspects which are very important is it is shown that ARNIs decrease the progression to chronic kidney disease patients. Number one, of course, with EGFR more than 30. So between 30 and 60, you can use it. Second thing is they actually also have oral hypoglycemic or anti-diabetic effects, and they can lower the HbA1c by about 1%. So there are many hypotheses. It's by relieving vascular stress, they decrease sympathetic nervous system activation and therefore decrease the sugar, whatever it is. So you have to be very careful as far as your anti-diabetic drugs. You might have to decrease the dose of that. Otherwise, you might get symptomatic hypoglycemia. Well, this is a very, very nice diagram by Mishra et al., where in which he talks about ARNIs, loop diuretics, vaccination, multi-pronged approach in heart failure, ARNI ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, mineralocorticoid antagonists. We know that vaccines against influenza and streptococcus pneumoniae work. Loop diuretics, of course, you can add metrolazone and hydralazine. It is useful in resistant heart failure. You may add Digox. So peripheral outliers are the ones like ivabradine, IV iron. Again, this has accrued more evidence in recent years. In heart failure, even with normal hemoglobin, if they're not iron replete, they benefit a lot. I talked about hydralazine and isosorbide dinitrate, oral anticoagulants, and management of arrhythmia, as we know, is important. Well, let us see what is the benefit of guideline-directed medical therapy. Please understand, alone ACE inhibitors, questionable benefit. ARBs, no benefit. Beta blockers, benefit. ACE inhibitor plus beta blocker, a little bit more benefit is there. ARBs and beta blockers, a huge benefit is there. Okay. ACE inhibitor and ARB does not have benefit and has got many more symptoms like hyperkalemia. So don't use it. ACE inhibitor and mineralocorticoid and antagonist have benefit. But look at this end of the spectrum. Significantly more benefit with ARNI, with beta blocker and mineralocorticoid antagonist. This is the best, most left toward maximum benefit out of all. So therefore, if you really want to give your patient the best chance of survival and best quality of life, please combine ARNI, beta blocker, and mineralocorticoid antagonist. It is better than ACE inhibitor, beta blocker, and mineralocorticoid antagonist. It is better than ACE inhibitor, ARB, and beta blocker. So this combination is our gold standard combination. So summary: medical therapy improves clinical outcomes in heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, but this is often underutilized and underdosed. Mildly symptomatic patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction remain at risk of events and require treatment intensification. And neprilysin inhibitors may potentiate reverse cardiac remodeling, which is very important. Early use of ARNI in acute decompensated heart failure is very much more beneficial. Even greater benefits can be attained than using it in chronic heart failure. ARNI is comparable to ACE inhibitor ARB in naive subjects who are not previously exposed. So better to start off with ARNI, and even at low dose, you get some benefit, although up titration is the key. Are there any questions? Hello?
Sir, just allow me a minute. We'll check for the question, sir. Sir, there is some questions in the chat box, sir. Please address it, sir.
Okay. The first question is: Pioneer Heart Failure has established efficacy of ARNI in ADHF. Do you recommend to use ARNI in all heart failure patients now in your practice? Yes. The only ones who have not tolerated ACE inhibitors with cough or angioedema are the contraindications. Can SGLT2 be given with ARNI? Of course, they can be given with ARNI and should be given with ARNI in affording patients. ARNI is tolerated in ADHF. The only problem is there are these patients who can have decreased systolic BP and hypotensive episodes despite those measures that I told you that can be there. Most of the patients are kept on 50 milligram, but actual dose is 200. How do you suggest everyone keep increasing the dose? Well, it's important. This is a very key question, Sufyan. So the question is this, that if somebody has tolerated the dose of 50 milligram BD well, you need to uptitrate even if his symptoms have gotten improvement, because your ultimate aim is to decrease hospitalization and mortality. And we know that there is, they say, the word stability in heart failure is just an illusion. So you keep increasing if the systolic BP is more than 110. 1 week after starting a drug, if your BP is above 110, go to level 2, go to 100 milligram BD, and then wait for another week. And if after you call him, all your patient in your OPD after a week, if the blood pressure is more than 110, if there is no adverse event, you can up titrate to 200. It is very important to up titrate. Don't think that the patient is improved, so we should not up titrate. Keep challenging the patient with greater doses. Of course, don't do that if the blood pressure has fallen down below 100. And one very interesting way to find it out is taking the blood pressure supine as well as standing. So whether there is an orthostatic hypotension or not. If there is orthostatic hypotension, that is the blood pressure was 110 on lying down and the blood pressure falls down to 90 on standing, then don't increment it, because your patient can start feeling giddy. Once the patient starts feeling giddiness and has pre-syncopal symptoms, then he will not be compliant to your therapy. So be careful, but you have to target and increase and carry out up titration. That is where skill of the physician lies. Not only adding ARNI, but decreasing the dose of diuretics, decreasing the additional vasodilators, making sure that he does rehabilitation exercise properly, making him understand the symptoms of postural hypotension so that he can report to you early. These are very important. Anything else?
Sir, we'll wait for another 30 seconds. With another question, sir, please address it.
Yes, this is a very good question. So post ADHD stabilization, at least for the first 1 month, call him weekly once you have started army. Call him weekly, do a creatinine after this on fifth day, and then maybe 14 days later. But keep calling him weekly for a month. If you can uptitrate it to 200 milligrams, then again 1 week later you call him. And after a month, you can start calling him monthly for 3 months, and thereafter 3 monthly or quarterly. 3 monthly is a fair enough follow.
Okay, sir. So it seems there are no more questions as of now. So would you like to wait or like to conclude the session?
I would like to conclude the session, and I would request you to share the recording of this session with me.
So thanks on behalf of Looping team. Thank you so much for the knowledge sharing, and thank you so much all participants for joining. Thank you, sir.